Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Empire of Dust. Derek Sloan stared at the blueprints spread across his desk, the same way he had for the past 25 years. At 53, his calloused hands told the story of a man who'd built an empire with raw determination and grit. Coastal Heights Construction had become one of the most respected names in Nevada, but lately, something had been eating away at the foundation of the life he'd created. "Mr. Sloan, your wife called again." His assistant Veronica hovered in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "She said to remind you about dinner tonight." Derek nodded without looking up. "Tell her I'll be there. Just finishing up the Henderson project proposal." The truth was, Derek had finished the proposal hours ago. He'd been finding more reasons to stay at the office lately. The Sloan household had changed, transformed into something cold and unfamiliar. When he finally arrived home, the sprawling desert mansion felt empty despite the luxury cars in the driveway. Marilyn's silver BMW, Preston's Audi, and Whitney's Range Rover, all paid for by his sweat and sacrifice. "You're late," Marilyn said as he walked through the door. Her voice had lost its warmth years ago, replaced with something that sounded like permanent disappointment. At 49, Marilyn Sloan maintained the polished appearance of old Vegas money, though she'd come from nothing, just like him. "Traffic," Derek lied. He kissed her cheek, noticing how she subtly pulled away. 20 years ago, she would have embraced him. 20 years ago, her eyes would have lit up when he walked through the door. Preston barely looked up from his phone when Derek entered the dining room. At 22, his son had Derek's build, but none of his work ethic. Full ride to UNLV, but more interested in parties than classes. Preston had been working at Coastal Heights for the past year, supposedly learning the business, though Derek rarely saw evidence of actual work. Whitney, their 19-year-old daughter, offered a half-hearted smile. She had always been closer to Derek than Preston was, but lately, even she had grown distant. "How was everyone's day?" Derek asked, trying to pierce the invisible wall between himself and his family. "Fine," Preston mumbled. "School was whatever." Whitney shrugged. Marilyn served dinner with mechanical precision. "I saw Nate today at the club. He said the Davidson project is ahead of schedule." Derek nodded. Nathaniel Lawson had been his project manager for 5 years. Good at his job, popular with clients and the crew. Younger than Derek by almost a decade, with the kind of easy charisma Derek had never possessed. "That's good to hear," Derek said, though something about Marilyn's casual mention of Nate bothered him. It wasn't the first time his wife had mentioned running into his project manager at the club. After dinner, Derek retreated to his study. Through the window, he could see Preston leaving in his Audi, probably heading to another party. Whitney disappeared to her room, and Marilyn claimed she had a headache and went to bed early. Derek opened his laptop and checked the GPS tracker app he'd installed weeks ago, something he'd never imagined doing in all his years of marriage. Marilyn's BMW was moving, heading away from their neighborhood, despite her supposed headache. His stomach clenched as he watched the blue dot travel across the screen, eventually stopping at an address he recognized as Nate Lawson's condo complex. His suspicions weren't new. Small things had been adding up for months. Marilyn's sudden interest in fitness, new clothes, mysterious appointments, and the growing coldness between them. What hurt more was how Preston and Whitney had been changing too. Secretive, avoiding him, almost contemptuous. Derek closed the laptop and poured himself a whiskey. He didn't break things or rage. That wasn't his style. Derek Sloan had built an empire by being calculating, patient, and thorough. If his family was betraying him, he would confirm it beyond any doubt. Then, and only then, would he decide how to respond. Little did they know, Derek Sloan never forgave betrayal. That was the one rule he had lived by since growing up in the foster system, where loyalty was the only currency that mattered. As he sipped his whiskey, he began to formulate a plan, not for reconciliation, but for something much colder. Chapter 2, Paper Trails. Derek didn't confront Marilyn about her late-night visit to Nate's condo. Instead, he began building his case methodically over the next 2 weeks. He hired Rudy Tanner, a discreet private investigator recommended by his attorney, Leo Donahue. "I need everything," Derek told Rudy during their first meeting at a diner far from Derek's usual haunts. "Every text, every call, every meeting. I want to know how long, and I want to know who else knows." Rudy, a weathered ex-cop with tired eyes, nodded. "I've handled hundreds of these cases, Mr. Sloan. It usually goes one of two ways. Either you're wrong, and we can all breathe easier, or you're right, and it's worse than you thought." "I'm right," Derek said flatly. "Just give me proof." At the office, Derek maintained his routine while keeping a closer eye on Nate. The younger man seemed unchanged, confident, friendly, completely at ease. It made Derek's blood boil how Nate could look him in the eye every day, discuss projects, even joke about weekend plans while sleeping with his wife. Derek also began documenting his own finances with meticulous precision. Coastal Heights construction was his life's work, and he made sure the business was ironclad in his name alone, despite Marilyn's occasional suggestions over the years that she should have some ownership stake for tax purposes. After a week, Rudy delivered his first report. Photos of Marilyn and Nate at restaurants, holding hands across tables, kissing in his car. Text message transcripts with explicit content that made Derek's jaw clench. But what truly gutted him was an audio recording from Nate's condo. "The kids are on board," Marilyn's voice came through clearly. "Preston was easy. He's always resented Derek's pressure. Whitney was harder, but she came around when I explained how much better everything would be with you instead. We just need to be patient," Nate replied. "The timing has to be right. Leo said the prenup makes things complicated unless we can prove certain things." Derek's blood ran cold. Leo, his attorney of 15 years, Leo Donahue, was apparently advising his wife and her lover. That evening, when Derek returned home, he watched his family with new eyes. Preston was home for once, laughing with Whitney in the kitchen. They fell silent when he entered. "Hey, Dad," Whitney said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How was work?" "Enlightening," Derek replied, searching his daughter's face for any sign of remorse or discomfort. There was none. Later, as Marilyn prepared for bed, she mentioned casually, "Preston wants to talk about taking on more responsibility at the company. I think it would be good for him." Derek nodded. "We'll see." As his family slept, Derek sat in his study reviewing Rudy's documents. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. Not just an affair, but a conspiracy to push him out of his own life. Texts between Preston and Nate revealed the younger man had been positioning himself as a mentor to Derek's son, filling his head with ideas about how outdated Derek's business methods were. Even more disturbing were the financial documents Rudy had uncovered. Small amounts had been siphoned from company accounts over the past 6 months. Not enough to notice immediately, but substantial in total. The money had gone into an LLC registered to Preston, with Marilyn and Nate as silent partners. The picture became crystal clear. His wife wanted him gone, his children wanted him gone, his project manager wanted his company and his life, and even his attorney was working against him. Derek didn't sleep that night. Instead, he began making calls to contacts he hadn't spoken to in years, people from before he was successful, people who understood that sometimes justice required getting your hands dirty. Chapter 3. The Family Meeting. 3 days later, Derek arrived home to find Preston's, Whitney's, and Marilyn's cars all in the driveway. Unusual for a Thursday evening. When he entered, they were seated in the living room, faces solemn. "Dad, we need to talk," Preston said, standing as Derek entered. "We're having a family meeting." Derek set down his briefcase, his face betraying nothing of what he knew. "What's this about?" Marilyn sat rigid on the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Derek, we've been trying to find the right way to say this for months." "Say what?" Derek took a seat, noting how they had positioned themselves across from him, a united front. Whitney looked uncomfortable but determined. "Dad, things haven't been working for a long time. You're never really here, even when you're physically present. You care more about the company than us." Preston nodded, emboldened by his sister's words. "You've built this idea of a perfect family in your head, but it's all about control for you. You've never actually seen any of us for who we are. Derek absorbed the accusations silently, watching the rehearsed performance unfold. We want you out by Friday, Preston finally said, his voice gaining confidence. We think it's best if we have some space. Permanent space. I understand, Derek replied, his calm response clearly throwing them off balance. They'd expected anger, arguments, perhaps even tears. You understand? Marilyn's voice held a note of suspicion. Yes, Derek nodded. I understand completely. After an awkward silence, Whitney spoke up. So you'll leave? I said I understand, Derek repeated, standing up. If you'll excuse me, I need to make a call. He walked to his study and closed the door, leaving them bewildered in the living room. He could hear their hushed, confused voices through the door. They had expected a fight. They had wanted a fight, something they could use against him later. Derek picked up his phone and called the only number that mattered now. Leo, it's Derek Sloan. We need to talk about my family situation. Tomorrow, first thing. When he emerged from his study 30 minutes later, the family meeting had dispersed. Marilyn approached him cautiously in the hallway. Derek, I know this is difficult, but it's for the best. We've grown apart in... Save it, Derek said quietly. I'll be out by Friday. Just like Preston asked. Marilyn looked taken aback by his easy acquiescence. Where will you go? Don't worry about me, Derek replied, his voice unervingly calm. I'll take care of myself. I always have. That night, Derek packed a single suitcase with essentials. He transferred key documents to his briefcase and removed family photos from their frames, placing them in a folder. As he worked, Whitney appeared in the doorway of the master bedroom. Dad! Her voice was smaller now, less certain than during the family meeting. Yes. Derek continued packing without looking up. I just wanted to say. She hesitated. I just want you to know it's not personal. Derek finally looked at his daughter, seeing not the little girl who once adored him, but a young woman who'd made her choice. Everything is personal, Whitney. That's the one thing I try to teach you and your brother. Every choice has consequences. Whitney shifted uncomfortably. Mom says you'll be fine, that you always land on your feet. Your mother's right about that, Derek nodded. I will be fine. As Thursday turned to Friday, Derek made one final sweep of the house he'd built. In the kitchen, he left his house keys and the key fob for his Mercedes, the only vehicle registered in both his and Marilyn's names. Goodbye, he said to the empty house. Before dawn, Derek Sloan drove away in a rental car, leaving behind the family that had betrayed him. But unlike what they believed, he wasn't admitting defeat. He was simply repositioning for the battle to come. Chapter 4. Foundations of Vengeance. Derek checked into the Westin under a different name, using cash. The suite offered a view of the Las Vegas Strip, glittering against the dawn sky. He'd already prepared this location a week earlier, installing secure lines and setting up what would become his war room. At precisely 8 a.m., a knock came at the door. Leo Donahue stood there, looking every bit the polished attorney in his tailored suit and affected smile. Derek, I came as soon as I could. This is all very sudden. Derek gestured him inside. Thank you for making the time, Leo. 20 years of friendship counts for something, right? Leo's smile faltered slightly. Of course. Now, you mentioned family issues on the phone. Sit down, Derek said, pouring 2 glasses of water. I had an interesting family meeting last night. My wife and children have asked me to leave my home. Leo adopted a sympathetic expression. I'm sorry to hear that, Derek. These things can be complicated. Cut the bullshit, Derek interrupted, his voice still calm. I know you've been advising Marilyn and Nate Lawson about how to break my prenup. I know about the meetings, the consultations, all of it. Leo's face drained of color. Derek, I don't know what you think you know. Derek slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos of Leo meeting with Marilyn and Nate at a restaurant outside of town, along with transcripts of phone calls. 20 years, Leo. 20 years, I trusted you with everything. Derek's voice remained measured, which somehow made it more terrifying. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue representing me, publicly. You're going to tell Marilyn and Nate that everything is proceeding as they hoped. And you're going to report every conversation back to me. That's a conflict of interest, Derek. I can't. You created the conflict when you betrayed me. Derek leaned forward. And you can and will do exactly what I'm asking. Unless you want the Bar Association to receive evidence of how you've been double-billing clients for years. Or maybe the IRS would be interested in those offshore accounts you think no one knows about. Leo swallowed hard. You wouldn't. I protect what's mine, Leo. Always have. The question is whether you're smart enough to get on the right side of this now, or if you want to go down with them. After Leo left, visibly shaken, Derek made his next move. He called Rudy Tanner for an update and then reached out to Sylvia Keller, an aggressive attorney from a rival firm who had tried to poach him as a client for years. I need a shadow counsel, he explained to Sylvia. Someone who can prepare everything without actually filing until I give the word. By noon, Derek had established his new command center. On the wall, he created a mapping of everyone involved in the conspiracy against him. Marilyn and Nate at the center, Preston and Whitney as willing accomplices, Leo as their legal advisor. But there were still pieces missing. Derek's phone rang. It was Boomer Walsh, an old friend from his construction days before he'd started his own company. Boomer had gone into private security after an accident left him with a permanent limp. Found your guy, Boomer said without preamble. Former tech specialist from the NSA, goes by Mouse. Not cheap, but he can get into anything with an IP address. Set up, Derek replied. Today, by nightfall, Mouse, a wiry man with thick glasses and constantly moving hands, had established surveillance on all of Marilyn's and the children's devices. Derek watched impassively as Mouse demonstrated how he could access text messages, emails, and even activate microphones remotely. What about the company's systems? Derek asked. Already mapped. Mouse replied, bringing up diagrams on his laptop. Found several unauthorized access points and evidence of data being copied. Someone's been very busy in your financial records. Nate Lawson, Derek said flatly. Likely. The access comes from his company credentials, but routed through proxies. Amateur attempts to cover tracks. Derek nodded. Keep monitoring. I want to know every move they make. That night, as Derek reviewed the growing evidence of betrayal, he received a text from Leo. Meeting with M and in tomorrow. They're filing Monday. Perfect timing, Derek thought. The weekend would give him exactly what he needed to set everything in motion. On Saturday morning, Derek made two crucial visits. First to Ray Domingo, a former client whose real estate development had been saved by Derek when other contractors walked away. Ray had connections throughout the Vegas business community, both legitimate and otherwise. I need leverage on Nathaniel Lawson, Derek explained in Ray's opulent office. Ray nodded slowly. The project manager who's been seen around town with your wife? Consider it done. Derek's second visit was to Coastal Heights Construction. Using his master keys, he entered when the weekend skeleton crew was on lunch break. In his office, he accessed the safe behind the bookshelf, removing original documents that never should leave the premises, incorporation papers, land deeds, and client contracts with handwritten addendums. As he was leaving, Derek encountered Veronica, his loyal assistant who had come in to catch up on work. Mr. Sloan, she said surprised. I thought you were taking personal time. I am, Derek replied, but I needed to retrieve some things. Veronica hesitated. Sir, Mr. Lawson came by yesterday with Mrs. Sloan. They were in your office for quite some time. Derek's expression didn't change. Thank you for telling me, Veronica. Actually, there's something I need your help with. By Sunday, Derek had set the foundation for his counterattack. Mouse had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Nate Lawson's activities, revealing a pattern of seducing wealthy married women, always targeting families with business interests he could exploit. Marilyn wasn't his first or even his most lucrative target. More disturbing were the conversations Mouse had intercepted between Nate and Preston. The older man had been grooming Derek's son for months, positioning himself as the father figure Preston supposedly needed. Together, they had been identifying Coastal Heights' most valuable assets and clients, planning how to retain them after Derek was pushed out. They're planning to force a sale of your company, Sylvia explained after reviewing the evidence. With Marilyn getting half in the divorce, and Preston as your son having apparent legitimate interest, they think they can pressure you to sell your remaining share rather than work with them. Derek smiled coldly. They've miscalculated. When Monday dawned, Derek was ready. Let them file their papers. His response would come when they least expected it, and from directions they'd never anticipated. Chapter 5: The Spider's Web. By Wednesday, the initial shock waves had hit. Marilyn had filed for divorce, citing irretrievable breakdown and emotional abandonment. Leo, playing his assigned double role perfectly, had publicly taken Derek's case while privately feeding information to Derek about Marilyn and Nate's strategies. Derek maintained his base at the Westin, expanding his operation to a second suite where Boomer and Mouse established 24/7 surveillance. The evidence continued to mount. Nate had already moved some personal items into the Sloan residence. Preston was telling colleagues at Coastal Heights that changes in management were coming. Whitney had withdrawn from her spring semester at college, citing family transition as the reason. They're awfully confident, Rudy observed, reviewing surveillance photos of Marilyn and Nate shopping for furniture together. Almost like they think this is already over. That's because they don't understand what they're actually fighting for, Derek replied. They think this is about assets, about money. It's not. It's about consequences. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after the family meeting, Derek initiated Phase 2. First, he had Sylvia file a countersuit to Marilyn's divorce petition, including explosive allegations of conspiracy, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The filing itself wasn't meant to succeed, merely to distract and unbalance. While Marilyn and Leo were engaged in emergency meetings about the countersuit, Derek made his first public move at Coastal Heights. He called an emergency board meeting where he revealed selective evidence of Nate's attempts to undermine the company. Effective immediately, Nathaniel Lawson is terminated from Coastal Heights Construction, Derek announced to the shocked board members. Security has already removed his access to all company properties and systems. Preston, who sat on the board in a junior role, turned pale. Dad, you can't just... Additionally, Derek continued as if Preston hadn't spoken. All employee access is temporarily restricted pending a full security audit. New authentication protocols are being implemented as we speak. The board members, mostly longtime associates who owed their wealth to Derek's success, nodded in agreement despite their confusion. Only Preston tried to object, but he was quickly silenced by the chairman's support of Derek's decisions. After the meeting, Preston confronted his father in the hallway. "What the hell are you doing? You can't just fire Nate without cause." Derek looked at his son calmly. "I have more cause than you know, Preston. And unlike you, I have the authority to protect what I built." "Mom was right about you," Preston spat. "You only care about control." "No," Derek replied. "I care about loyalty. Something you should have learned before conspiring with your mother's lover to steal my company." Preston's face revealed everything Derek needed to know. That's not what happened," he stammered. "Go home, Preston," Derek said, "while you still have one." That evening, Ray Domingo delivered the promised information on Nate Lawson. The file revealed that Nate had served time for fraud in his 20s, a fact he'd managed to keep hidden with a sealed record and a changed middle name. More damning were records of 3 previous relationships with married women, all of whom had divorced successful husbands after Nate entered their lives. In 2 cases, he had ended up with executive positions in the ex-husband's companies. "He's a professional con man," Ray explained. "High-functioning sociopath, according to the prison psychologist's report. Targets wealthy families with existing tensions, exploits the weaknesses." Derek nodded. "Has he ever been violent?" "Not directly," Ray said. "He's too smart for that. Manipulates others to do the dirty work while keeping his hands clean." Derek added the information to his war room wall. The picture was becoming clearer. Nate had identified the Sloan family as a target, seduced Marilyn, and then systematically turned the children against their father. His end goal wasn't just Marilyn or even a position at Coastal Heights. It was complete replacement of Derek in every aspect of his life. On Friday morning, Derek received an unexpected visitor at the Westin. Whitney stood outside his suite, looking less confident than during the family meeting. "How did you find me?" Derek asked, letting her in. "It wasn't hard," Whitney replied. "You're still using your American Express for the room." Derek nodded, making a mental note to address that oversight. "What do you want, Whitney?" Things are weird at home, she said, pacing the suite. Mom and Nate are acting like everything's fine, but Preston came home furious yesterday. He said you accused him of trying to steal the company. I stated facts, Derek corrected. The same facts I'll state in court if necessary. Whitney looked troubled. Dad, this isn't what was supposed to happen. Mom said you were unhappy, that you'd be better off without the pressure of the family, that you'd be relieved. Derek studied his daughter carefully. Did you really believe that, Whitney? Or was it just easier than admitting what you were actually doing? I don't know anymore, she admitted, tears forming. Nate keeps saying everything will calm down once the initial shock passes, but it doesn't feel right. For a moment, Derek felt the pull of paternal instinct, the desire to comfort his daughter, to forgive. But then he remembered the recordings, the way she had participated in the conspiracy for months. Her tears now came only after seeing consequences begin. You made your choice at the family meeting, Derek said evenly. I suggest you prepare for what comes next. What does that mean? Whitney asked, wiping her eyes. It means actions have consequences, Derek replied. Now, I have work to do. After Whitney left, Derek called Mouse. I need to know everywhere she goes, everyone she talks to. She might be having second thoughts, or this could be their attempt to gather intelligence. By the end of the week, Derek had a comprehensive understanding of the conspiracy against him. Nate had orchestrated everything, using Marilyn's dissatisfaction and the children's resentments as weapons. The plan had been to push Derek out emotionally and then legally, enabling them to take control of Coastal Heights through a combination of Marilyn's divorce settlement and Preston's position. What they hadn't counted on was Derek's lifetime of preparing for betrayal. Every major asset was protected through complex legal structures. The company's most valuable contracts contained clauses that Derek had personally negotiated, many contingent on his direct involvement. And most importantly, Derek had spent decades building relationships with people who owed him favors, people who now formed a network of allies against his family's betrayal. On Sunday night, 10 days after the family meeting, Derek received confirmation that all preparations were complete. Tomorrow would begin the true reckoning. Are you sure you want to go this far? Sylvia asked during their final review. Once we start, there's no going back. Derek looked at the evidence wall, at the photos of his family plotting against him, at the transcripts of their contemptuous words. They didn't give me a choice. They thought they could take everything I built and discard me without consequences. They need to understand why that was a mistake. Chapter 6. Checkmate Preparations. On Monday morning, exactly 11 days after the family meeting, Derek Sloan walked into Coastal Heights Construction dressed impeccably in his best suit. Employees stared as he made his way through the building. Many had heard rumors of his family troubles, and his absence the previous week had fueled speculation. Good morning, he said calmly to the receptionist. Please inform all department heads that there will be a company-wide meeting at 10 a.m. In his office, Derek found evidence of disturbance, subtle shifts in how things were arranged, files that had been moved and imperfectly replaced. Veronica confirmed his suspicions. Mr. Preston has been using your office almost daily, she said. And Mr. Lawson was here again on Friday, despite having been terminated. Thank you, Veronica. Your loyalty won't be forgotten. At 10 a.m., Derek stood before his assembled employees in the company's large conference room. Preston arrived late, slipping in at the back with a defiant expression. I want to address the rumors directly, Derek began. Yes, my wife has filed for divorce. Yes, there are family issues being resolved. But make no mistake, Coastal Heights Construction remains under my full control and direction. He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room. Some individuals have attempted to create confusion about the company's future. Let me be absolutely clear. There will be no change in ownership or senior management. Anyone who has been told otherwise has been misled. Derek then revealed charts showing the company's performance and projections. We have secured 3 major new contracts in the past week. Our financial position is stronger than ever. Preston shifted uncomfortably at the back of the room as Derek continued. Finally, effective immediately, all employees will be required to revalidate their security credentials. Any attempt to access company data through unauthorized channels will result in immediate termination and potential legal action. After the meeting, Derek summoned Preston to his office. When his son entered, Derek was reviewing documents at his desk. "You're bluffing," Preston said without preamble. "Mom gets half of everything in the divorce. That includes the company." Derek looked up calmly. "Is that what Nate told you? That your mother automatically gets half of Coastal Heights?" "That's how it works," Preston insisted, though less confidently. "Sit down," Derek ordered. When Preston reluctantly complied, Derek continued. "Coastal Heights Construction is owned by the Sloan Family Trust, which I established before marrying your mother. The trust has specific succession provisions that cannot be altered during a divorce proceeding. This was only partially true, a calculated deception to unsettle Preston." "That can't be legal," Preston objected. "Your boyfriend Nate isn't the legal expert he pretends to be," Derek replied. "Did he also tell you about his fraud conviction? Or about the other families he's infiltrated?" Preston's expression confirmed he knew nothing about Nate's history. "You've been played, son. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize it before it's too late." As Preston left, visibly shaken, Derek made another call to Ray Domingo. "It's time for Phase 3. Activate everything." That afternoon, Derek had Sylvia file amended divorce counterclaims with new evidence attached. Photos of Nate with his previous targets, bank records showing suspicious transfers, and affidavits from former business associates of the other men Nate had ruined. The filings weren't sealed, ensuring the information would quickly become public. Simultaneously, Boomer's team executed a more direct approach. Using the evidence of Nate's past fraud, they contacted his parole officer from his earlier conviction. Though the terms had technically ended years ago, the revelation of potential new fraudulent activity was enough to trigger an official review. By evening, Nate received an unwelcome visit from law enforcement at the Sloan residence. Though they didn't arrest him, the officer's presence and questions about his finances created exactly the spectacle Derek had intended in the affluent neighborhood. Meanwhile, Mouse implemented the digital side of Derek's plan. Every device belonging to Marilyn, Nate, Preston, and Whitney received the same message simultaneously. A simple image of a chessboard with the king in checkmate, accompanied by the text, "Betrayal has consequences." When Marilyn called Leo in a panic, the attorney followed his script perfectly. "I don't know what Derek is doing, but the new filings are devastating, Marilyn. There are fraud allegations, conspiracy claims. This is much worse than we anticipated." That night, Derek received a furious call from Marilyn. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Police came to our home because of your lies." "Not lies, Marilyn. Evidence. There's a difference. You tried to intimidate me," she hissed. "It won't work. I know my rights." "Do you also know who you've invited into your bed?" Derek asked calmly. "Do you know about the other wives, the other businesses? Did you know you're just the latest in a pattern for him?" Her momentary silence told him she hadn't known. "This can still end cleanly," Derek offered, following his script. "Signed a revised settlement agreement Leo will deliver tomorrow. Walk away with the house and a fair financial package. Or fight me and end up with nothing." "You're bluffing," Marilyn said, echoing Preston's words from earlier. "You can't erase 20 years of marriage." "You did that the moment you conspired with Nate," Derek replied. "Don't confuse my previous generosity with weakness." After hanging up, Derek reviewed the final preparations with his team. Bank accounts had been secured, digital evidence backed up in multiple locations, loyal employees positioned in key roles throughout Coastal Heights. Everything was in place for the final act. "What about your kids?" Rudy asked. "Are you sure you want to go through with this part?" Derek looked at the family photos he'd brought from the house, now pinned to the war room wall. They made their choice. Now they'll live with it. Tuesday dawned with Derek feeling a cold sense of calm. After 2 weeks of preparation, today would bring the culmination of his response to betrayal. He dressed carefully in his most intimidating suit and headed to the courthouse where Marilyn's divorce petition would have its first hearing. The trap was set. All the pieces were in position. Now it was time to spring the deadfall on those who had thought they could discard him so easily. Chapter 7. The Trap Springs. The courtroom was tense as Derek took his seat at the respondent's table with Sylvia beside him, not Leo. Marilyn's eyes widened at the substitution of counsel. Nate sat directly behind her, whispering urgently in her ear. Preston and Whitney occupied seats in the row behind them, both looking uncomfortable. Judge Eleanor Briggs entered, a no-nonsense veteran of the family court system known for her sharp insights and low tolerance for games. Derek had not chosen this judge by accident. Sylvia had maneuvered skillfully to ensure Judge Briggs would hear the case. "We have several motions before us today," Judge Briggs began, reviewing the files. Quite an unusual number for an initial hearing. She looked up, eyes narrowing, and quite unusual allegations. "Ms. Keller, you're representing Mr. Sloan today?" Sylvia stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Donahue has recused himself due to conflict of interest." Leo, seated at the back of the courtroom, shifted uncomfortably. Marilyn's attorney, Thomas Wilson, appeared confused by this development, but proceeded with his arguments for temporary support and exclusive use of the marital residence. When it was Sylvia's turn to respond, she dropped the first bombshell. "Your Honor, we have evidence that this divorce action is part of a larger conspiracy to defraud Mr. Sloan of his business assets." She submitted a thick binder of documents. "These materials demonstrate that Mrs. Sloan, her paramour Mr. Lawson, and unfortunately even the Sloan children have engaged in a coordinated effort to strip Mr. Sloan of his company and assets." The judge reviewed the materials with a deepening frown while Marilyn whispered frantically with her attorney. Nate maintained a calm facade, though Derek noticed his leg bouncing nervously under the table. "These are serious allegations," Judge Briggs said finally. "Mr. Wilson, did you review these documents before today?" "We've had no opportunity, Your Honor," Wilson protested. "This is the first we're seeing these claims." "Then perhaps you should take time to review them now," the judge suggested, calling a 30-minute recess. As they filed out, Marilyn approached Derek in the hallway. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "You're embarrassing all of us with these ridiculous accusations." "Not accusations," Derek corrected quietly. "Evidence. And this is just the beginning." When court resumed, Wilson attempted to dismiss Derek's claims as retaliatory fabrications, but the judge remained focused on the documentation. "Your Honor," Sylvia continued, "we have additional evidence that Mr. Lawson, who appears to be more than merely Mrs. Sloan's romantic interest, has a criminal record for similar schemes targeting wealthy families. We've included court records from Arizona and California." Nate visibly paled as his past was exposed. Marilyn turned to look at him with new uncertainty in her eyes. The hearing concluded with Judge Briggs issuing temporary orders that heavily favored Derek. No provisional support for Marilyn, continued joint access to the marital residence for Derek, and a freeze on all business assets pending further review. Additionally, the judge added, "I'm ordering forensic accounting of all accounts associated with the parties, including any business interests. No assets are to be transferred or dissipated while this matter is pending." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, tipped off anonymously about the salacious details of the case involving one of Las Vegas's successful businessmen. Derek walked past them without comment while Marilyn, Nate, and the children were bombarded with questions about fraud allegations and criminal history. Phase 1, the courtroom strategy, had worked perfectly, but Derek was just getting started. That afternoon, he returned to Coastal Heights for Phase 2. Security guards, new ones hired through Boomer's connections, were stationed at every entrance. When Preston arrived after the hearing, his access badge was denied. "What is this?" Preston demanded at the front desk. The security guard called Derek, who came to the lobby. "Your access has been suspended pending the investigation," Derek explained calmly. "You can't keep me out of the company." Preston shouted, causing heads to turn throughout the lobby. "I'm not keeping you out of the company," Derek clarified. "I'm keeping you away from sensitive information while you're actively involved in a conspiracy against the company's interests." The board voted unanimously this morning. Preston's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This isn't over." "You're right about that," Derek agreed. When Preston returned home, he found Coastal Heights vehicles parked outside. Inside, a team was removing all company property, laptops, files, even Preston's company car keys. "What are they doing?" Whitney asked, watching in shock as the team efficiently cleared out Preston's home office. "Company property recovery," the team leader explained, showing a court order signed by Judge Briggs. Standard procedure for suspended employees under investigation. Similar teams arrived simultaneously at Nate's condo and the Sloan residence. Marilyn called Derek in a fury. "They're taking everything. My laptop, my phone. They say they're company property, but they're my personal devices." "Check your employment contract with the Sloan Family Foundation," Derek replied calmly. "All electronic devices provided to family members remain company property. It's paragraph 7, I believe." The digital devices were delivered directly to Mouse, who began immediate forensic analysis to extract additional evidence. By evening, they had recovered deleted messages and files that further documented the conspiracy. The real masterstroke came the next morning. Local business publications and the Las Vegas Sun ran front-page stories about the divorce case and fraud allegations. Derek had never spoken to the press, but the court filings were public record, and an anonymous source had provided reporters with key documents highlighting Nate's criminal history and pattern of targeting wealthy families. Coastal Heights clients began calling, concerned about the company's stability. Derek personally reassured each one, projecting calm confidence, while subtly highlighting how Preston and Nate had attempted to approach them about future business outside proper channels. Many clients expressed outrage at these unauthorized contacts, further strengthening Derek's position. By Wednesday afternoon, cracks had formed in the conspiracy. Whitney called Derek, her voice breaking. "Dad, it's all falling apart. Mom and Nate are fighting constantly. Preston's drinking and saying we made a huge mistake. I don't know what to do." "You should have thought about that before you participated in trying to destroy me," Derek replied, unmoved by her tears. "Actions have consequences, Whitney." That evening, Leo Donahue delivered the final piece of intelligence. Marilyn had consulted another attorney about separating her case from Nate's growing legal problems. "She's trying to salvage what she can," Leo explained. "The new evidence has her terrified about criminal liability." Derek nodded. "Perfect. Now we move to Endgame." Chapter 8. Scorched Earth. On Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the family meeting, Derek implemented the Endgame strategy. First, Sylvia filed amended pleadings with the new evidence recovered from the digital devices, including damning text exchanges where Marilyn and Nate explicitly discussed their plan to get Derek out and take everything. Simultaneously, Derek's contacts in the district attorney's office received comprehensive documentation of financial irregularities involving Nate, Preston, and the funds they had diverted from Coastal Heights through the Shell LLC. At Coastal Heights, Derek called an emergency board meeting where he presented incontrovertible evidence of Preston's attempts to divert clients and misrepresent his authority within the company. "The board has no choice but to formally terminate Preston Sloan's employment and remove him from his board position," Derek concluded. The vote was unanimous. By noon, the family that had thought to discard Derek was in complete disarray. Marilyn's attorney had withdrawn from her case after discovering she had withheld critical information. Nate faced potential criminal charges for fraud and was already receiving calls from his parole officer. Preston had been fired and publicly humiliated. Whitney was the only one not directly impacted yet, but her academic career hung in limbo after her impulsive withdrawal from college. Derek returned to the Sloan residence that afternoon, accompanied by security personnel and movers. Using the court order granting him continued access, he systematically removed his personal belongings and key items of significant value. Artwork he had collected, family heirlooms from his side, and important documents. Marilyn arrived home during this process, her composure finally breaking at the sight of movers carrying out items. "You're stripping the house now," she cried. "Isn't the public humiliation enough?" Derek looked at his wife of 20 years without emotion. "This is just property, Marilyn. You were willing to take everything from me, my company, my home, my relationship with my children. Property is the least of what you tried to steal. I wanted out of a loveless marriage," she protested. You wanted out with everything I built, Derek corrected. There's a difference. You could have asked for a divorce honestly, but you chose conspiracy instead. As Derek supervised the removal of his possessions, Whitney arrived home from an appointment with her college advisor. Her eyes were red from crying. They won't let me re-enroll for this semester, she said to no one in particular. I'm going to lose my scholarship. Derek paused, feeling a momentary twinge of paternal concern that he quickly suppressed. Consider it part of your education, he said. Loyalty matters. Choices have consequences. By evening, Derek had reclaimed his key possessions and returned to his suite at the Westin. There, his team briefed him on the day's developments. Mouse had uncovered evidence that Nate was already contacting another wealthy woman, a divorcee who had recently inherited a construction supply company. Ray's contacts reported that Nate had made inquiries about selling his condo quickly. He's planning to run, Boomer concluded. Derek nodded. Let him try. First thing Friday morning, Derek received word that Nate had indeed attempted to leave town on a red-eye flight to Miami, only to be detained at the airport by officers responding to an anonymous tip about potential flight from prosecution. At the courthouse, Judge Briggs had scheduled an emergency hearing based on the new filings. Marilyn appeared without legal representation, having been unable to secure new counsel on short notice. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her eyes haunted. Mrs. Sloan, are you representing yourself today? Judge Briggs asked. Temporarily, Your Honor, Marilyn replied. I'm in the process of securing new counsel. Perhaps that's wise, given the serious nature of these allegations, the judge noted, reviewing the latest filings. These text messages are particularly troubling. The hearing proceeded with Sylvia methodically presenting the new evidence, while Marilyn struggled to mount any effective defense. Your Honor, Marilyn finally said, desperation evident in her voice. I admit to the affair, but these allegations of conspiracy are exaggerated. I was unhappy in my marriage, and Nate Lawson took advantage of that vulnerability. Derek watched impassively as his wife attempted to distance herself from Nate and reframe herself as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. Judge Briggs was unmoved. Mrs. Sloan, the evidence suggests your involvement was knowing and deliberate. The court takes a very dim view of attempts to use divorce proceedings as a means to defraud a spouse of business interests. The judge issued updated temporary orders. Derek would have exclusive use of the marital residence. All joint accounts would remain frozen, and Marilyn would be required to provide a full accounting of all communications regarding Coastal Heights or any of Derek's business interests. As Marilyn left the courtroom, she approached Derek one last time. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to live on? You still have your car, Derek replied coldly, and the credit cards in your name alone. Figure out, Marilyn. You were planning a life without me. Now you've got it. That afternoon, Whitney and Preston appeared at Derek's hotel suite, both visibly distressed. Dad, this has gone too far, Preston said, trying to sound authoritative despite his shaken appearance. Mom's staying at a hotel because she has nowhere else to go. Nate's probably going to jail. My career is destroyed. Our actions have consequences, Whitney added, her voice small. We get that now, but we're still your children. Derek studied them, remembering the callous way they had participated in the family meeting, the months of betrayal leading up to it. Biology makes you my children, Derek responded evenly. But family is about loyalty. You chose your side. I'm simply honoring your choice. So that's it, Preston demanded. You're just cutting us off completely? Over one mistake. This wasn't one mistake, Derek corrected. This was hundreds of choices, made day after day for months. Conspiracies don't happen by accident. After they left, Derek reviewed the endgame with his team. Coastal Heights was secure. The court case was proceeding in his favor, and the family that had betrayed him was experiencing the full weight of their choices. What happens next? Sylvia asked. Derek looked at the evidence wall, now complete with documentation of every aspect of the betrayal and his systematic response. Now we finish it, he said, on my terms. Chapter 9, Ashes and Iron. 1 month after the family meeting, Derek Sloan sat in Judge Briggs's chambers for a settlement conference. The past weeks had seen a complete reversal of fortunes for everyone involved. Nate Lawson had been formally charged with fraud, violation of parole conditions, and conspiracy. He remained in custody, unable to post the substantial bail. His previous victims had come forward after the publicity, strengthening the case against him. Marilyn had been staying at progressively less expensive hotels as her personal resources dwindled. Her attempts to secure high-powered legal representation had failed as the evidence mounted. She had finally retained a pragmatic attorney who advised her to salvage what she could. Preston had been unable to find employment in construction, as word of his attempted betrayal had spread throughout the industry. His former colleagues at Coastal Heights avoided him, and his expensive lifestyle had quickly become unsustainable. Whitney had managed to negotiate a probationary return to college for the summer semester, but her scholarship remained in jeopardy. In a judge's chambers, Derek and Sylvia faced Marilyn and her new attorney, Howard Gaines. Judge Briggs got straight to the point. "I've reviewed the proposed settlement agreement submitted by Ms. Keller. Mr. Gaines, has your client considered the terms?" Gaines nodded grimly. "We have, Your Honor. While the terms are severe, Mrs. Sloan understands her position has been compromised by recent developments. The settlement terms were indeed severe. Marilyn would receive no alimony and no share of Coastal Heights construction. She would get the house and a one-time payment of $500,000, a fraction of what an ordinary divorce settlement would have provided after 20 years of marriage." "Mrs. Sloan," Judge Briggs addressed Marilyn directly, "are you entering into this agreement voluntarily? Do you understand that by doing so, you are waiving potential claims to substantially more assets?" Marilyn looked exhausted, her once perfect appearance now strained and aged. "I understand, Your Honor. I want this to be over." After Marilyn signed the agreement, Judge Briggs dismissed her and her attorney, asking Derek and Sylvia to remain. "Mr. Sloan," the judge said once they were alone, "while I recognize the evidence of conspiracy was substantial, this settlement borders on punitive." "My client has been more than fair, Your Honor," Sylvia interjected. "Given the documented conspiracy and potential criminal liability, Mrs. Sloan is fortunate to receive anything." Judge Briggs studied Derek carefully. "This isn't just about the assets, is it, Mr. Sloan?" "No, Your Honor," Derek admitted. "It's about consequences." After leaving the courthouse, Derek returned to Coastal Heights Construction. Over the past month, he had restructured the company, promoting loyal employees and implementing new security measures. Business had not only stabilized, but grown, as Derek channeled his cold fury into aggressive expansion. In his office, Veronica informed him that Preston and Whitney were waiting to see him. Derek considered refusing, but finally nodded. "Send them in." His children entered, looking diminished compared to the confident conspirators of a month ago. Whitney spoke first. "We heard Mom sign the settlement." Her voice was hesitant. "Is it true she only got the house and some cash?" "That's correct," Derek confirmed. "She made her choice." Preston seemed to struggle with conflicting emotions. "And what about us? Is there ever going to be any way back from this?" Derek regarded them dispassionately. "Back to what exactly? The family that plotted to throw me away like garbage? That family doesn't exist anymore. We made a terrible mistake," Whitney pleaded. "We listened to Mom and Nate when we should have talked to you directly." "A mistake is forgetting an appointment," Derek corrected. "What you did was betrayal. Premeditated, coordinated betrayal." Derek opened his desk drawer and removed 2 envelopes, handing one to each of them. "These contain checks for $50,000. Consider it your inheritance delivered early. There won't be more." Preston stared at the envelope. "That's it? After everything, that's all we're worth to you?" "No," Derek replied evenly. "That's all your loyalty was worth. There's a difference." After they left, Derek stood at his office window overlooking Las Vegas. In just 1 month, he had systematically dismantled the conspiracy against him and rebuilt his life on his own terms. The family that had betrayed him had been dealt with decisively, each experiencing the consequences of their choices. That evening, Derek moved into a new penthouse he had purchased. Not the family home he could have reclaimed, but a fresh start without reminders of betrayal. As he unpacked the few personal items he had chosen to keep, his phone rang. It was Ray Domingo. "Thought you'd want to know," Ray said without preamble. "Nate Lawson accepted a plea deal today. 5 years minimum." "Good," Derek responded. "And the other matter?" "Handled," Ray confirmed. "The paper trail on that LLC has been anonymously delivered to the IRS. Preston won't see a dime of what they skimmed, and he'll be answering some very uncomfortable questions." After hanging up, Derek poured himself a whiskey and looked out over the city lights. Some might view his actions as ruthless, even cruel. But Derek Sloan had learned early in life that loyalty was the only currency that truly mattered. Those who betrayed him had made their choice, and he had simply ensured they experienced the full consequences of that choice. The family meeting had been meant to end him, to push him out of his own life and strip him of everything he had built. Instead, it had revealed the true nature of those he had trusted, allowing him to excise the cancer of betrayal completely. Derek raised his glass in a solitary toast. "To consequences," he said to the empty room, his voice carrying the cold satisfaction of a man who had faced betrayal and emerged victorious. 3 months later, Derek stood on the site of Coastal Heights' newest project, a massive resort development that would cement his company's position as the premier construction firm in Nevada. The betrayal that had been meant to destroy him had instead become the catalyst for his greatest success. Occasionally, he received updates about his former family. Marilyn had been forced to sell the house, unable to maintain it on her limited funds. Preston had left Las Vegas entirely after the IRS investigation. Whitney had managed to continue her education but maintained a low profile, the social standing she had once enjoyed now tarnished by scandal. As for Nate Lawson, his conviction had led to investigations into his previous schemes, extending his sentence and ensuring he would spend the better part of a decade behind bars. Derek had not forgiven any of them. He never would. But he had rebuilt his life on his own terms, stronger and more successful than before. The family meeting that was supposed to end him had instead revealed his true strength. Not the ability to maintain relationships at any cost, but the willingness to sever them completely when betrayal made them untenable. In the end, Derek Sloan had remained true to the one principle that had guided him through life. Loyalty matters above all else, and betrayal always has its price. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.